Welcome back, mythology lovers. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most terrifying and tragic figures in Norse mythology, Fenrir, the monstrous wolf whose destiny was to bring about the end of the world itself. This isn't just a story about a big bad wolf. This is a tale of prophecy, betrayal, and the inevitable march toward Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Fenrir's story reveals the darker side of Norse mythology, where even the gods, in their fear and desperation, make choices that seal their own fate. So grab your drinking horn, settle in, and let's explore the legend of Fenrir, from his birth as the son of Loki to his final, apocalyptic battle with Odin himself. Our story begins in Jotunheim, the land of the giants, where the trickster god Loki formed a forbidden union with the giantess Angerboda. From this relationship came three monstrous children, each destined to play a crucial role in the destruction of the cosmos. There was Jormungandr, the world serpent, Hel, who would rule the realm of the dead, and Fenrir, the wolf who would one day devour Odin himself. The Aesir gods, led by Odin the All-Father, learned of these children through prophecy. The seers spoke of doom, of chaos, of the ending of all things, and these three offspring of Loki were at the center of it all. When Odin discovered their existence, he made a fateful decision. Rather than leaving them in Jotunheim, he brought them to Asgard, believing he could control what he feared. Jormungandr was cast into the ocean, where he grew to encircle Midgard. Hel was sent to the underworld to rule over those who died of sickness and old age. But Fenrir they kept in Asgard itself. At first, Fenrir was just a wolf cub, and the gods watched him carefully. But this was no ordinary wolf. Day by day, week by week, Fenrir grew at an alarming rate. His appetite was insatiable, his strength incredible, and soon the gods realized they had a problem. Only one god was brave enough to approach Fenrir to feed him Tyr, the god of war and justice, known for his courage and honor. As Fenrir continued to grow, the gods' unease turned to fear. They had seen the prophecies. They knew what he would become. The wolf's eyes held an intelligence that unsettled them, and his size became truly terrifying. The gods faced a dilemma. They couldn't kill Fenrir on Asgard's sacred ground, as it would defile their holy realm with blood. But they couldn't simply let him roam free either, so they devised a plan. They would bind him. They would convince Fenrir to let them test his strength with chains, framing it as a game, a challenge worthy of his growing might. It was deception wrapped in flattery, and it revealed the fear that had taken root in the hearts of the gods. The first attempt to bind Fenrir involved a massive chain called leading. The gods approached Fenrir with smiles and challenges, asking if he would test his strength against their strongest fetters. Fenrir, young and confident, agreed. He allowed them to bind him with lading. And then, with barely any effort, he flexed his muscles, and the chain shattered into pieces. The gods laughed nervously, praising his strength, but their fear deepened. They tried again with an even stronger chain, called Dromi, forged to be twice as strong as lading. Once more they challenged Fenrir, appealing to his pride. Once more he agreed, and once more, with a powerful kick and stretch, Fenrir broke free, sending fragments of Dromi flying across Asgard. The saying to get loose out of lading or to dash out of Dromi became expressions for achieving freedom through great effort. The gods were now desperate. They turned to the dwarves, the master craftsmen of the cosmos, who dwelled deep beneath the mountains. Odin sent messengers to the realm of the dark elves with a special commission: create a fetter that could hold Fenrir, no matter how strong he became. The dwarves worked their magic, and what they created was unlike any chain that had ever existed. They called it Gleipnir, and it looked like nothing more than a silk ribbon, smooth, soft, and deceptively delicate. But Gleipnir was made from 6 impossible things: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. Because these things don't exist, the ribbon was unbreakable, held together by paradox and magic itself. When the gods presented Gleipnir to Fenrir, the wolf was immediately suspicious. He had grown wiser as well as larger, and this thin ribbon reeked of trickery. The gods insisted it was just another test of strength, even weaker looking than the previous chains. But Fenrir's instincts warned him of danger. He proposed a condition. If this is truly just a test, then one of you must place your hand in my mouth as a pledge of good faith. If you're being honest and I can break free, I'll release your hand unharmed. But if this is a trap and I cannot break free, then I will bite off the hand as payment for your betrayal. The gods looked at each other nervously. No one wanted to volunteer. They all knew Gleipnir would hold, which meant whoever put their hand in Fenrir's mouth would lose it. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Tyr, the brave god who had fed Fenrir all these years, stepped forward. Tyr was the god of justice and oaths, and he understood the weight of what was happening. He knew the gods were breaking faith with Fenrir, but he also believed in protecting Asgard. So he placed his right hand, his sword hand, into the wolf's jaws. The other gods bound Fenrir with Gleipnir, wrapping the magical ribbon around the wolf's massive body. Fenrir struggled, pulled, thrashed, and fought with all his tremendous strength. But the more he struggled, the tighter Gleipnir became. The impossible ribbon held firm. Fenrir realized he had been betrayed, tricked by those who had raised him. In his rage and pain, he bit down hard, severing Tyr's hand at the wrist. The gods, despite their victory, felt no joy. They had bound Fenrir, but at a terrible cost, not just Tyr's hand, but something more profound. They had broken their word, violated the sacred bonds of trust, and created an enemy whose hatred would burn until the end of time. They took Fenrir to a remote island and secured Gleipnir to a massive boulder called Gjöll, which they buried deep in the earth. Then, to ensure he couldn't bite at them, they thrust a sword through his jaws, the hilt propping open his lower jaw and the point piercing through his upper palate. Fenrir's howls of rage and pain echoed across the realms, and his drool formed a river called Van, which means hope or expectation, because Fenrir's freedom was now the hope and expectation of all the forces aligned against Asgard. There, Fenrir remained, bound and tormented, growing ever stronger in his chains, his hatred for the gods burning like an eternal flame. But the Norns, the weavers of fate, had already spoken. This imprisonment was not the end of Fenrir's story. It was merely the middle chapter. The prophecies were clear and terrible. When Ragnarok came, the twilight of the gods, the end of the world, Fenrir would break free from Gleipnir. The signs would be unmistakable. 3 winters would come without a summer in between, the age of axes and swords, when brother would turn against brother and moral order would collapse. The sky would darken, the stars would fall, and the very earth would shake. At that moment, Fenrir would snap his bonds. His jaws would open so wide that his upper jaw would touch the sky, while his lower jaw scraped the earth. Fire would blaze from his eyes and nostrils as he charged across the battlefield of Vigrid, where gods and giants would meet for their final confrontation, and there, in the chaos of the ultimate battle, Fenrir would seek out Odin, the All-Father, the king of the gods who had ordered his imprisonment. The prophecy stated this with chilling certainty. Fenrir would devour Odin, swallowing the god who had bound him. The wolf's revenge would be complete. But the story doesn't end there. Odin's son, Vidar, the silent god of vengeance, would step forward, wearing a special shoe made from all the leather scraps collected throughout history. Vidar would step on Fenrir's lower jaw and, grasping the upper jaw with his hands, would tear the great wolf apart, finally ending the beast's reign of terror. Fenrir's story is more than just a tale of a monster and the gods who feared him. It's a profound meditation on fate, free will, and the consequences of fear-driven decisions. The gods, in trying to prevent the prophecy, actually set it in motion. By betraying Fenrir, by chaining him out of fear rather than treating him with honor, they created the very monster who would destroy them. There's a tragic element to Fenrir's character. He was born a monster only by prophecy, not by choice. The gods' treatment of him, the deception, the imprisonment, the torture, turned prophecy into self-fulfilling reality. Had they shown him trust and respect, might things have been different? The sagas don't say, but the question haunts the narrative. Fenrir also represents the untamed forces of nature and chaos that civilization tries to control, but ultimately cannot. He is winter's fury, the wild wolf at the edge of the firelight, the primal force that no amount of cunning or magic can permanently suppress. The Norse understood that chaos cannot be eliminated, only temporarily contained. And even that containment comes at a cost. Fenrir remains one of the most powerful and complex figures in Norse mythology, neither purely evil nor innocent, but a being caught in the web of fate and the fears of the gods. His story reminds us that sometimes the monsters we create are born from our own actions, and that trying to escape destiny often leads us directly to it. The great wolf still waits in the Norse imagination. Bound but not broken, his hatred eternal, his revenge inevitable. And when Ragnarok comes, as the prophecy says it must, Fenrir will have his day. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the legend of Fenrir. If you enjoyed this exploration of Norse mythology, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which mythological figure you'd like me to cover next. Until then, may your chains be breakable and your fate be kind. Skål!